Hi, students. Welcome back. I thought it would be really helpful to go through an example essay for this problem solution essay so you can have a better understanding of exactly what we're going to be doing over this next unit and before you begin working on your outline this week. So, this particular student decided to tackle the social issue of COVID-19. And specifically, they took a look at the education system and what our government has chosen to do versus what they believe the solution is for deciding on whether or not students need to be in school right now. Please keep in mind this was from last semester, so some of this research may be from previous research, and some of it has been updated at this point in time. By April 15th, April 2020, more than 130,000 school closings impacted almost 57,000 children in the United States, reports researchers from International Journal of Environmental Research and Public Health. The large number of school closures in the country is due to the rapid spread of severe acute respiratory syndrome coronavirus 2, more commonly known as COVID 19. The first case of COVID 19 was reported in China after infected animals were consumed by locals in Wuhan. The Chinese natives who consumed these infected animals reported similar symptoms to pneumonia, but researchers soon discovered a new highly contagious strain of the coronavirus, which rapidly spread across the world. Before the Chinese government had the chance to contain the new virus, cases started appearing in other countries. By the middle of April 2020, only 4 months after the first COVID case of COVID 19, there were reports of 70,000 new cases worldwide each day, 30,000 of which were being reported in the United States alone. To try to combat the growing number of coronavirus cases, the United States entered a quarantine where everything was closed except for the essential places such as hospitals, grocery stores, and gas stations. Unfortunately, schools are not considered essential, so they were forced to shut down and continue classes online for their students. By having classes online, many students lose their access to education because they do not have technology needed to attend virtual classes. The only way to ensure all students have the chance to learn is by opening schools and returning to in person learning, which can happen safely by following the regulations posted by the CDC. What I want you to see in this introduction is there's a very clear hook where the student uses a quote from an academic peer reviewed resource. We're provided some background information about COVID 19. And then at the very end of the introduction, we see that the student lists both the problem and a solution. You should not finish your introduction without ensuring that both parts are listed. The newest strand of the coronavirus continued to spread rapidly through the United States, which made it unsafe for schools to reopen. By March 2020, around the time schools started closing, there were a total of 918 reported cases of COVID 19 in the United States. Officials believe keeping schools opened would only increase the total number of cases due to the extremely contagious nature of coronavirus. COVID 19 is believed to spread from one person to another via respiratory droplets produced by coughing and sneezing. Students, especially those in elementary schools, do not always cover their mouth when coughing or sneezing, which can lead to infected droplets spreading through classrooms, infecting other children. The infected droplets can also land on and remain on surfaces where the virus can spread to others if a normal individual touches these objects or surfaces and further on touches their eyes, nose, or mouth. In most United States schools, students are required to share materials and textbooks with other children because schools do not have the resources needed to give each student their own supplies. If a student with COVID 19 uses any school materials, they could spread the disease to their classmates who use the same materials later. Since the coronavirus is extremely contagious, it can spread through the schools, so officials felt like it was dangerous for the students to remain in class. So, this student gave a little bit of background information as to why the schools initially closed. She showed who was involved, including the students and school officials, and then gave us some research to support her ideas as well. With the fear of coronavirus spreading through the school, state leaders started creating solutions to keep children safe. In North Carolina, Governor Roy Cooper ordered all schools to close for 2 weeks in March before announcing all K-12 public schools would remain closed for the remainder of the 2019-20 school year. Since schools were forced to shut down, classes were moved online, and with the new transitions, teachers had to start working from home. The students had to start submitting all assignments virtually, and state officials believe shutting schools down would protect children and their teachers from catching the disease because they would not come into contact with each other. To try and stop the spread of COVID-19, along with protecting students and staff from the deadly disease, state leaders shut down the schools in spring 2020. Now, bear in mind, this student believes that this is the problem. So that's why, while she uses this word solution in this topic sentence, she's really discussing the problem itself, which is shutting down the school systems. Due to school closure, students have struggled academically, physically, and mentally. Since the transition to virtual classes is unprecedented, many people, especially children, have had a hard time adjusting to the new normal. Teachers worked tirelessly to make sure their students continued to learn after schools were shut down, but reports show that only 60% of students participated or engaged in remote learning regularly, which led many children to fall behind academically. Without seeing their students face to face, teachers cannot ensure they are listening to lectures and completing assignments, which is crucial for understanding new curriculum. Since children are not as engaged in virtual learning as they are in in-person learning, they are falling behind academically. One survey even predicts that the rate of reading ability gained in kindergarten children during COVID-19 school closures without formal in-person education will decrease 66%. If students did not engage in online learning after schools closed, they would not have been able to learn all of their grades curriculum, which would have made it difficult to complete all assigned tasks. The students who fell behind during virtual learning will likely still be behind their peers when schools return to in-person learning because the new curriculum typically builds on previous years. Apart from struggling academically, students also struggled physically and mentally during school closures. The same article reports that children have fewer regular eating and sleeping patterns, longer screen time, fewer physical activities, increased stress, and less social interaction during school closures. When schools first shut down, students had to adjust to a new normal, which involves staying home. Since students were not required to attend school, a lot of parents stopped enforcing certain policies at home. By having fewer policies in place, children were no longer following daily routines, which led them to creating new habits, some of which were bad for their physical health. Mentally, students were affected by the lack of interaction they had with their peers. When schools were open, students had the chance to see their friends every day, but the unexpected closures instantly led to students being isolated from others. With the mandated school closures and move to virtual learning, many students experienced negative consequences academically, physically, and mentally. Guys, one of the things that I really want you to take note of that this student did a great job of, we see clearly there's a topic sentence here, and they're continuing to prove the problem about students struggling academically, physically, and mentally. We see them break those ideas down. And not only do they break those ideas down, but they use research to support those ideas. And then they expand on the research afterwards. After they go through each part, the academic, physical, and mental consequences, we see that they summarize the paragraph with a really strong summative sentence at the end. School closures during the coronavirus have also impacted parents and the financial stability of some families. Since students are not allowed to attend school throughout a day, a lot of parents have had to take off work to watch their children, especially those with children who are too young to stay by themselves. Parents taking time off from work has hurt some families because many jobs do not offer paid time off, meaning parents can lose pay for days they don't work or possibly even their jobs entirely. With the loss of jobs, a lot of families have had to turn to the government for financial support. The Congressional Research Service reports the unemployment rate peaked at a level not seen since data collection started in 1948 in April 2020 before declining to a still high level in September. During this pandemic, many people have been out of work more than any time during the past 70 years. With the number of businesses closed down to the virus, it is currently hard to find a job. So, parents who are fired for taking time off to stay with their children may have a hard time finding a new job when they are able to return to work again. Without finding adequate work, some families could continue to suffer financially for years after the pandemic ends. After schools were shut down, many parents had to make arrangements that put their jobs at risk and threaten the financial stability of their family. Again, we see a very clear topic where the student is proving that this is a problem because of the financial stability of parents. We see research being used and an explanation of how that research connects to their ideas. And then again, we see a really strong summative sentence that ties back in those ideas. Since school was since schools were first forced to close down, there have been many proposed solutions to make sure that students continue learning during this uncertain time. One of the first suggested solutions and the most common was to move classes online and hold virtual lectures. With the new learning style, most teachers held online classes where they had a chance to interact with their students and continue teaching new curriculum. Teachers also converted their class materials to digital assignments, and students were required to complete the work at home and submit it online. By holding virtual classes, some students had the chance to interact with their peers and continue learning from home. Other students, however, fell behind because they did not have equal access to the online classes. One of the main reasons students were not able to attend virtual classes is they didn't have the access to needed resources, including a computer and internet. To try to combat this problem, school systems rushed to buy and distribute laptops and Wi Fi hotspots to students, and service providers offered discounts to low income families, efforts that made a dent in the number of students that did not have access to their classes. Although providing laptops and internets to students seemed like an acceptable solution, there were many children who still did not have access to these resources, and they continued to fall behind their peers. As the 2021 school year got closer, state officials started announcing their plans to reopen schools following the suggestions from the Center for Disease Control and Prevention. The CDC recommends that all faculty and students wear face masks and wash their hands often and have their temperatures taken upon entry. Teachers are also encouraged to space students apart and clean frequently, touch surfaces often. When it comes to the number of students who attend class, the CDC suggests hybrid classes, where some students participate in virtual and other students participate in in-person learning to minimize the risk of spreading COVID-19. If schools choose to have hybrid classes, students will be required to complete some assignments online, so children will face many of the same problems they did during virtual learning. With the expected change in education due to coronavirus, officials across the country have proposed new solution to ensure students continue learning. So we see that the student is shifting into the solution component. And one of the great things that you can do in a problem solution essay is addressing a solution that's already noted. For this particular student, they talked about how that the proposed solution was A, to go virtual, and then B, to go hybrid. And one of the things that the student does really well is she talked about how this did not work. She showed how students didn't have access to certain resources, and she showed that some of the same hardships that students were facing with virtual learning are the same hardships that are going to continue with hybrid classes. Although many different solutions have been proposed, the only way to ensure students are learning the required curriculum and completing assignments is by returning to full in person learning. Here we see the student is shifting into their unique proposed solution. So I hate to go back, but I want to show you just so that you can understand the layout. We see the introduction with this very clear thesis statement of showing the problem and the solution. We see that the student took the next really 3 pages to prove the problem. Then we see them shift into the solution component where they showed a solution that the government tried to enact but did not work. And then we see them shift into their unique proposed solution. If schools completely reopen, students and staff can follow the guidelines posted by the CDC, such as wearing masks and frequently washing their hands, which will ensure the safety of everyone in the school. Opening full time also gives children an equal chance to learn new information and complete all assignments, regardless of their situations at home. If parents do not feel safe sending their children back to school, they have the option of continuing virtual learning or even homeschool. A survey taken in May 2020 reports that 6 out of 10 parents are considering continuing with home learning rather than sending their children to school in the fall. If parents who want to keep their children at home are likely the ones who have the resources and time to help with virtual learning. Some parents, however, have other responsibilities, so they do not have the time to help their children with online classes. The parents who do not have the resources to help with virtual learning need schools to reopen to ensure their children are receiving a thorough education. Over the past 6 months, there have been many possible solutions to make sure students continue learning during the coronavirus pandemic, but the most effective will be completely reopening schools. The rapid spread of COVID 19 affected the United States in many ways, but one of the biggest impacts on children has been the closure of schools. Closing schools has hurt children academically, physically, and mentally, along with putting financial strain on some families. If schools follow the guidelines posted by the CDC, students can safely return to in person learning. In person learning gives each student an equal chance to learn and will allow them to receive the support that they need to be successful academically. To make sure students receive the best education they can, allow them to be in school, and give them the chance to return to in person learning. Again, we see that the student in the conclusion gave the highlights of the essay, restated the thesis statement, and then gave a call to action. She literally said, allow them to be in school. And then we have a works cited page that's properly formatted in MLA, alphabetized with hanging indentions. And the student used more than 6 sources, which is completely fine, but at least 4 of those were peer reviewed. And I actually think even more of hers were peer reviewed. Guys, I hope this helped you understand the format a little bit better. I'm going to link this lecture in the weekly folder along with the student's essay so that you can go through it and take a look at it in greater detail if you wish. I hope you have a wonderful day, and I look forward to reading your great work.